Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, and it is also Black History Month, so I wanted to focus on a short story from a Black author. Although I think today I might have not chosen a Black author or someone who identifies as Black again, similar to last week, but I suppose that's just how things go. And today's short story is all about a man's fascination with another man that he's encountered. I am referring to The Start of the Affair by Nuruddin Farah, which was published in The New Yorker in 2014. For those who don't know, Nuruddin Farah is a Somalian writer who's been writing since the 1970s. They've written mostly literature about Somalia, but also about the Pan-African experience. He's written specifically about arranged marriages and sort of things like that. I would be interested in checking out more of what he's written based on this short story here, because I was a fan not only of the short story but the writing in general there. What's also interesting is Nuruddin was actually sort of exiled from Somalia, because his first novel had a lot of criticism of Somalia and the Somalian government, and there were rumors that he was going to be arrested, so he just left, and he didn't return for another 20 years. He currently lives in America, but he also lives in South Africa, which is where this story also takes place, so writing about maybe some experiences or just writing where you know or something like that. And as I mentioned before, like I say this is Black History Month, but this is written about a Somalian author, and not everyone in Somalia necessarily identifies as Black, or mostly they'll just identify as Somalian or as their particular tribe or something like that. And sometimes people in Somalia they might be Muslim or Arabic or identified that way. So calling it Black History Month is, or like, it's not as an accurate thing to say. So there should be an asterisk here that I didn't cover every Black author, or like every author I covered wasn't necessarily identifying as Black. It's just something important to note, especially as we talk about Black History Month and we cover writers from, Africa and other related places. But without further ado, let's talk about The Start of the Affair. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Start of the Affair focuses on James MacPherson. He is a retired politics professor who is living in South Africa. He's well regarded for the work that he did in covering the Pan-African experience and his work, and he's currently retired, as I mentioned before, and he owns a restaurant in Pretoria, which he doesn't even really do a lot of work. He just sits in a corner and writes and stares at the patrons, and tries to figure out more about what's going on in the world. He's observing a lot, is what I'm saying, and he has the manager kind of run the whole show while he's just hanging around. And he often focuses on the people, but as the narrator notes, his focus is on men more so than the women. And silly me, when I was reading that, I was like, oh, he's maybe he's just interested in the African men. And then I realized as the story progressed, oh, that was their way of saying, oh, that James is gay, or at least bisexual, according to the narrative. But I just wanted to make an interesting observation there. But as he's watching these men, he develops somewhat of a fascination with a man named Ahmed, and when he inquires about it with the cooks and whatnot, who are giving Ahmed free meals because that he's poorer and whatnot, the cooks and everyone start gossiping about why James is interested in Ahmed. But James eventually finds out that Ahmed runs a shop and that he's also an immigrant. He goes and pays him a visit where he has a conversation, learns a little bit more about his family and his struggle in getting to South Africa and how he's trying to gain refugee status, but his paperwork isn't going through the right channels and whatnot. And so Ahmed is having a bit of a struggle, and James is slowly trying to figure out how he can woo Ahmed. Although it's not really clear if Ahmed is gay, James is still interested in him and is trying to pursue a relationship. At the same time, James also has thoughts of his ex-wife, or not his ex-wife, his dead wife, Martha. He's a widower. He seemed to love her, but he's also interested in men. And he had a fascination with a young preteen Somalian boy that he wasn't able to consummate a relationship with, but I think because he realized he was a young boy, and now that Ahmed is a Somalian boy or a Somalian man, like he feels more happy about that relationship and wants to pursue that. James tells the kitchen staff to give Ahmed better food, which upsets them a little bit, so they start giving him like expired food, and Ahmed gets sick as a result of that. And James uses this as an opportunity to take care of him. He even takes Ahmed to his house, and Ahmed is surprised by the number of books that he has and his fancy lifestyle, including having dogs and a lot of computers and even servants. And Ahmed just seems interested there. But James has a lot of questions about Ahmed's sort of history, and he learns that Ahmed's father might have been a Somalian warlord who has been exploiting the country for his resources, and Ahmed might be trying to escape the conflict in Somalia as a result. It's clear Ahmed's father isn't coming after him, so I don't know what the significance of all that is. But as Ahmed spends more time with James, he begins to change. He seems to abandon the store that he was working with, and it gets broken into, which Ahmed doesn't seem to care about. He's wearing fancier clothes, and his Somalian friends are wondering where he's at, and so they pay attention to him, trying to see what's going on there. And James also seems to change in that he begins to ignore the restaurant, especially as Ahmed spends more time at home with James, with those two hanging out together. And James even overhears one of the cooks saying that Ahmed is like a toy boy for James. And James is like, I wish that were happening, but Ahmed doesn't seem to want to make any moves about this. And so they eventually just spend more time at home just holding hands and watching TV. And as the story comes to a close, one night Ahmed is sleeping in a bed, and James comes over and gets in the bed naked with him. Ahmed doesn't seem to object to this, but he also notes, I'm not in the mood for having sex. And as the story comes to a close, James wonders when he's going to be able to, enjoy the fruits of this relationship and have sex with Ahmed. And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, this is a very unusual type of story. It kind of repulsed me at times with what James was doing to Ahmed, sort of manipulating him and whatnot. But I think that's the point that Nuruddin is trying to make here. But one of the main themes at the start of the affair, one of the main themes of this story is cultural and class differences. James and Ahmed belong to different parts of South African society. James is a world travel scholar with a business and servants, and he seems to be living in the upper crust of life. He even has associates who work in the government who can hurry the visa process along or the refugee status along and make things easier for Ahmed. So James doesn't really know too much of a struggle. The worst thing that's happened to him, at least recently, is that his wife died. So he doesn't really seem to have too much going wrong. Meanwhile, Ahmed is a Somalian immigrant who sleeps at work, isn't able to go to medical appointments because he doesn't have the money, and he's been imprisoned because he was an immigrant in different countries, and he's heard stories of his friends getting raped in those prisons, although that hasn't happened to him. Although he might be like a big name in Somalia because his father has money and whatnot, Ahmed clearly doesn't want that life and has chosen to immigrate. And so he's ended up here where he doesn't have a lot, and he's relying on the kindness of restaurants to really get meals and not have to struggle in that capacity. And so you see that difficulty with the language. James noting that Ahmed particularly has difficulty when he's nervous or agitated. He begins messing up words. He even notes that he might have he might be speaking street English, where it's just a basic understanding of the language. And then, of course, the issues with medical care and the issue with refugee papers, the differences between James and Ahmed, where James just has to ask somebody and Ahmed has to wait and hope that somebody actually addresses his case. So a lot of cultural and class differences between the two. And you would think that there can't really be a relationship between these two people because there's just such a huge cultural and class gap that like they can't really understand each other, or that like one person has to either, like James has to go to Ahmed's level or Ahmed has to be risen up, sort of like a Pretty Woman type situation. And that's sort of what happens in this story. So I like how Farah kind of notes these class differences, because it does come up in something else that Farah is trying to say. And indeed, the other thing that Farah is trying to say here is trying to address is James and Ahmed's relationship and some particularly not so good things about it. James seems obsessed with Ahmed. It's partially not even Ahmed that he's focused on. He just recalls another friend that he had who had a son who was a preteen that he wanted to be with, but he couldn't because there were issues of consent and probably statutory rape. I don't know the laws of those countries, but he chose not to indulge in that relationship. But now Ahmed reminds him of that boy, and so he's kind of pursuing that with Ahmed, even though Ahmed might not be gay, even though Ahmed is not that boy that he once wanted to be with. A whole lot of creepy, unsettling things about that that I think Nuruddin is trying to draw attention to. And meanwhile, Ahmed seems indifferent to this relationship. He's just happy that someone is providing for him and is sort of like showing him kindness that the rest of society might not be showing him. And there are instances where like James kind of pursues things further, and Ahmed doesn't really put a stop to it, but he also doesn't encourage it. Again, he's indifferent about this. And it might be because things are kind of bad in Ahmed's life, or he's struggling so much that he doesn't have time to think about a relationship. After all, if you were living in poverty, if you were barely trying to make ends meet, would you be trying to pursue a relationship, especially one that might not be so welcome in society? I don't know what LGBT rights are like in South Africa, but I imagine they're not where they are in other Western countries. Of course, that might be making assumptions. So if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below. But again, Ahmed just seems indifferent here, and that might be a reflection of the society in which he lives. But it does seem like James has a colonialist Western fascination with Ahmed, that rather than being interested in him, he's more interested in just trying to Westernize this Somalian immigrant. That he's like, again, it's like a Pretty Woman type situation, but a million times worse, because he believes Ahmed is inherently uncivilized and wants to bring him up to his level, which you can see the horrific implications of that. Like, James wants to Westernize this man in order to make him appropriate for any relationship that he might have. And so Ahmed is being colonized in a different way here than you would normally think. I don't think Farah is going necessarily that far, but given what Farah has written in the past, I could kind of see that him making an argument there. But also, even if he's not saying it, like the writing is there for you to make an argument for it, which I think is important. And so this also raises a number of questions. Is this love? Probably not, especially if one party isn't really that interested in the relationship. And again, you could argue that maybe James isn't in love, he's more obsessed, or he just wants to pursue something that he felt in the past. Is Ahmed a toy? Because as one of the cooks says, they refer to Ahmed as a toy boy. James doesn't really care about that, and in fact, he kind of wishes it would be the case. But it still seems like Ahmed is a toy, that James is manipulating him to his heart's desire in order to gain some satisfaction from this relationship, and so that he may like have sex with him or pleasure himself with him whenever he wants. And it's less like James is less interested if Ahmed returning that affection and more just allowing him to do what he wishes to him. And then the other question, as I mentioned before, like Ahmed is indifferent, but is Ahmed really interested in this relationship? It seems like he's happy to be friends with James, but the issue with this is that like Ahmed doesn't really care about the love that James has, and he's really only here because James is giving him stuff. James is providing for him. So like he's gonna be there regardless of whether he's gay, regardless of whether he's interested or not, because his only other option is to live on the streets or live in his shop, and try to run that, even though he doesn't seem to be having a lot of success. So again, that's not really love if you're like giving someone something and they're only there because of what you're giving them. And again, that's also the colonialization and of the relationship. That's the whole aspect of like one party is only there because you stand to have the power in that relationship, and that other person will be largely affected if you suddenly stop providing those benefits. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Start of the Affair by Nuruddin Farah. A really interesting and really good short story. I really love Farah's writing here, and I found myself again repulsed by what was happening in this short story. Felt very like not very good. It seemed like nobody actually cared what happened to Ahmed, and it was more, what can I get out of Ahmed? What is the quickest way I can sleep with Ahmed? Which, it kind of eliminates Ahmed's personhood and makes him more of an object, so more so than anything else, which, might be the case with Westerners. It's not really specified if James is a Westerner in this story. He might be just an upper class South African who has seen a lot of Africa and the rest of the world. But given how James is written, I would say it does seem like he's a Western outsider who's come in to sort of stand on top of South African society and manipulate people to his own desires. Or he could just be ignorant of his view of the world, not really questioning or actually thinking about how he's affecting people. And again, that there's a lot to discuss with this story, and it's really good. I think this is probably one of the better short stories that I've read in a while. If you have any thoughts on what I said here, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion with you about The Start of the Affair. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this story or this author if they don't already know. And I have a feeling a lot of people might not know who Farah is, and I hope we can get the word out in some capacity. I'll also put a link to the story in the description because it's in the New Yorker, which you can find online. Definitely go out and read it. Yeah, it's definitely something that I think is worth looking at. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and South African travels. Farewell.